Thank you, Tracy. I mean, you put so much work into this. Thank you. So I always think stress, why are we not talking about it? Often the missing piece of the puzzle, and I'm going to talk about some great patient stories as well. So we're going to talk about burnout today and 7 key strategies. But first of all, I want you to do a bit of a check-in, because how often do we really check in and just say, how are you feeling today? Because often we're on this roller coaster ride of life, and we're so caught up in the to-do list of things to do. So have a little bit of a check-in, go, how are you feeling? What challenges are you facing today? And I just want to show of hands how many people are facing any of these challenges this week. Yeah, absolutely. So often this takes over life, this takes over our thoughts, and we just get caught up in just doing rather than being. So can we get here? Can we get to a point where we're actually waking up, loving the day ahead of us, waiting for the day ahead of us instead of feeling dread? And this is what burnout is actually all about. So when they define burnout, they actually always say about burnout relating to workplace, but I actually say burnout is related to every part of your life. So you could be having maternal burnout, carers burnout, as well as work burnout. And it's so prevalent. I think there was a recent study saying over 50% of workers are experiencing burnout, and another study saying over 40% of doctors are experiencing burnout. So what we need to do is stop and ask why, what is leading to burnout, and what can we do about it? So when you think about burnout, it's a story of chronic stress. It's months, if not years, of just doing, of not sitting and doing nothing, in fact. And this chronic stress leads to a point where you're physically and mentally exhausted. And that's the point of burnout, where you go, I actually can't keep going on, but I have to. I have to because I've got a job to go to. I've got to pay the bills. I've got a mortgage. And that's when you feel that's burnout. And we're going to actually go through a couple of things today. So first of all is understanding what is happening in this stress reaction. And when you know what's happening in the stress reaction, you can actually do something about it. The next thing is the 7 key strategies, which are actually all simple, free, and so incredibly effective. And the last thing, we're actually going to do a quick 1-minute burnout quiz just to see where you're at in terms of mental health. So let's just talk about the stress reaction. It's a good reminder of how do we feel when we're reacting to things, because we often go straight into physical. We're going into, wow, the overwhelm, the palpitations, the chest tightness, the freezing mode. But what exactly is happening? And it actually all starts with a thought. And that's what I want to repeat again. It starts with a thought, our perception of reality that is triggering an emotion. And in today's world, the emotion can be multiple things. It could be fear, it could be embarrassment. All sorts of emotions can trigger a fear response. So what happens in the body, the amygdala, which is part of the brain that detects fear, is sending signals to the rest of the body saying, right, we need to get you out of here. So it's that fight, freeze, flee response. And it's actually sending signals to the adrenal glands. So the adrenal glands sit on top of your kidneys. And it's often forgotten in medicine, believe it or not. Not many people think about the adrenal glands, and not many people think about stress. But the adrenal glands actually secrete your cortisol, your adrenaline, noradrenaline, but also your female hormones and a few other hormones. Now, what happens in the stress response is actually designed to save us from a scary situation. For example, crossing a main road, or you've got something really fearful coming up. It's actually designed to keep us alert. But what happens in today's world is that chronic stress response. You're in that chronic fear response. And I'm not talking about being in fear a couple of hours. I'm talking about being in fear a couple of days, months, or even years. And many of my patients are in that high arousal for years. And that becomes their normal. And it's really interesting that research has shown the amygdala actually, it gets set to your baseline. And your baseline is whatever is familiar to you. So you can actually be in the fear mode or anxious mode, and you realize that's normal for you, and you don't know what calm feels like. So I always remind patients about going on to the circadian rhythm. So this is what our bodies are designed to do, to keep us awake and tell us when to go to sleep. But often, when you're in that stress mode, you're actually spiking cortisol throughout the day, even at night. And so what we're designed to do is designed to have that high spike at about 9 in the morning. But in today's world, with so many different things, for example, the emotions, blue light toxicity, being in that chronic stress response, we're spiking throughout the day. So what actually happens over time? So I'm not talking about acute stress. Acute stress, we're great. We can deal with that, but it's carrying that chronic stress. And often we have not connected the dots to chronic disease. Yes, we talk about diabetes, for example. That's a good example for today, but we're not talking about all the other chronic diseases that we haven't mentioned stress. So over time, when you think about cortisol, think about its releasing sugar. It's like taking a steroid. It's like taking teaspoons of sugar throughout the day. So yes, we eat sugar, but we also produce it ourselves, and it's that cortisol response. So over time, that high cortisol, high adrenaline will lead to a whole series of chronic diseases. So insomnia, anxiety, many people are familiar with the irritable guts in terms of diarrhea to constipation. Yes, people have understood now about that mind-gut connection, but also thyroid. It affects your thyroid. And what about just mental health? Over time, chronic stress will lead to mental health. And we often look for a pill to solve these issues, when in actual fact, we need to get back to that root cause. And this is when we go to the 7 steps. But before we go there, so let's have a think about all of these challenges. And what do we want from all of these strategies? We want energy, clarity, focus, concentration. That's what it's going to give us in order to find your solution. And anyone who's been working with Tracey will know about those principles of mind, thought, and consciousness. We've actually got the solutions within. It's just that we need the clarity and space to find those solutions, because life is stressful. But when you're in that mode of brain fog, fatigue, you actually don't have the clarity to find those solutions of how do I stop? How do I create a better life for me? So let's go through the 7 steps, and it's all familiar to you, but what we've done today is we're just connecting the dots to how it's actually going to help you feel better. So number 1 is breathe. And first thing is, it's quite surprising the number of patients that come to see me who are breathing quite shallow. And what does that mean? It's when you take a deep breath in, the first part of the body to rise is your chest and not your tummy. So when you're in the anxious state, we've actually taught ourselves to shallow breathe. It's a stress response. And what happens over time, we keep shallow breathing. So what actually happens in our bodies is that we're actually keeping ourselves in that cortisol response. We're actually raising those cortisol, but we're not triggering the vagus nerve, that calming nervous system. So this is a great reminder to do a bit of a check-in and say, okay, how am I breathing today? Because when you are conscious, you can deep breathe. But when you're in that stress mode, you do go into shallow breathing. And it's something so simple, so effective. For example, you've got a meeting coming up, you've got a long list of emails that you've got to check in the morning. Take some lovely deep breaths. And I always say, put a bit of a post-it note on your laptop or on a reminder on your phone to constantly just check in. And that deep breath activates the vagus nerve, that calming nervous system, and it calms you down. It's so, so effective. So that's really quick, and you can do that straight away. And the next thing, what I always say to patients is, yes, you've got to breathe, but next thing, the second part you really want to focus on is sleep. It's the most important part of the day. It's the easiest to give up, the hardest to take back. And in a study, actually, they've actually done close to 50% are chronically sleep deprived. And what that actually means, you're getting less than 6 hours of sleep. And funnily enough, that's equivalent to being drunk on the road. So can you imagine, when you look at our community, look at our population, how many are sleep deprived and how many are actually sort of going on suboptimal health? And we can be so different. We can do things so differently. So this is a quick questionnaire that you can actually do yourself. And there's 3 questions I normally ask patients to make it really quick. Is yes, Shami, I get to bed really easily. It's absolutely fine. I can watch TV and I can get to bed. And I go, oh, but what happens at night? Oh, yeah, I do wake up to go to the toilet a couple of times at night. I do actually have an interrupted sleep. And what about when you wake up? Do you wake up with energy? And they go, actually, you know what? I am struggling to get out of bed. So I keep it really simple. Can you get to bed easily, but can you stay asleep? And do you wake up refreshed? And more often than not, many people are not waking up refreshed. And that tells me a lot about that cortisol response overnight. So just a reminder about sleep. What I'm really going to focus on today is the screen time, the blue light. We are living in blue light toxicity. And it's just a reminder of just being indoors, artificial light, being on your phones, TV, laptops. And that's something I actually say right from the start. Think about how much blue light you're exposed to. And that's something we actually ask in our questionnaire. And it's phenomenal, maybe 8, 12, 14 hours. And humans were not designed to be in blue light. We're actually designed to be in nature 6 to 8 hours in the day. We're actually craving red light, infrared, and we are blue light toxic. So what is that actually doing? Because it's so invisible, it's so insidious, we don't even think about it. We're not really affected. Believe it or not, blue light increases your cortisol. Believe it or not, blue light depletes your dopamine. So when you're blue light toxic, you are craving that sugar, you're craving the scrolling, the doom scrolling, you're a bit agitated, you're a bit fidgety, maybe a bit irritable. And there's so many studies now showing the impact of screen time and mental health. Then what do I see in clinic? Anxiety, fatigue, sugar cravings. And we always go back to blue light. And 3 simple strategies that I give to patients that you can easily do from day number 1 is getting some morning sun. So if it's the first thing you do in the morning, not to touch your phones, but get out and get some morning sun. I know it's hard in winter, but even just when it's a sunny day, get some morning sun. And number 2 is actually there's a great software called iristech.co, IRIS tech.co, and it's about $20 US, and you download it onto your laptop and it actually blocks blue light, and it's phenomenal what it does. And the 3rd thing is blue light blocking glasses. We underestimate the power. So can you imagine how all of that has a massive impact? And I've got patients with quite severe mental health conditions, and they did those 3 steps, and it was quite phenomenal. They go, wow, I'm feeling so much calmer in the day. And apart from all the steps that we're going to talk about, I'm feeling so much calmer. My anxiety is sort of calmed down, but also I'm not sugar craving, and I'm having a much deeper sleep. And this is what we're aiming for. So, yeah. So this is a good reminder. It's something that you've been talking about all week about movement, but something I'm going to mention about movement. Oh yeah. Yeah. So something about movement you're so familiar about. Are we moving enough? So a majority of patients that come to see me have desk-based jobs. We're probably sitting at our desk for about 8 to 10 hours, but that's not the only part of the day. You're waking up, you're sitting for meals, you're sitting driving to work, you're sitting commuting, you're sitting at home relaxing in front of the TV. So we're actually sitting for a lot longer. So how I say, you can't change your work, but you can actually create a few habits around work where you can actually say, I'm going to keep the printer that I have to walk to. I need to keep walking to get some water. I need to have regular breaks in the day. You can actually design your workspace where you are moving at least every half an hour. So that's movement. But what I do want to say, when you think about stress, people often think, right, I'm going to start running. I'm going to start exercising. I see many women who over-exercise and under-eat. Now, what happens is when you're over-exercising or doing high cardio, the body responds to it as a stress response. And it's really interesting when I have to say, actually, it's clear that you're in the stress response. For you to lose weight, you actually need to do lots of low impact cardio and stop the running. And yes, let's look at food, and it's not about calories in versus out. And they start losing weight. So I just want to make a point about You know, when you think about stress, you go, right, I'm going to go for a run. But if you're highly stressed and your body is in the chronic stress response, running is the last thing you want to do. You actually want to think about yoga, meditation, restorative practices, even just weight training. The body needs to calm down, and you need to look at all practices as well. So as you all know, it's probably been repeated so many times in this weekend, but it's so great for mental health. And I often say to many patients, move for mental health, not for weight. And it doesn't take long. I often say it only takes 5 minutes of movement, and you're feeling different. So when you're in the stress response, if you can just imagine, you've got 12 hours of sitting in blue light, you're probably craving sugar, which we're going to come into. There's some steps that you can easily take. Right, I'm going to move. I'm going to get out in nature. I'm going to spend 5 to 10 minutes in my lunch hour in the sun and come back and just see how you feel. So sugar, Peter's mentioned so much about it, but I'm just going to tell a story about sugar. It's really interesting how we don't connect the dots between stress and sugar. Stress equals cortisol, and cortisol equals sugar. So if you're in the chronic stress response and you've gone, right, I've gone keto, I'm going low carb, but I'm still in that chronic stress response, sugar is still making an impact. And I see so many patients who said, I've tried low carb, I've gone carnivore, but why is my fasting insulin still high? And they are in a high stress environment. They're not sleeping, they're chronically stressed, they've probably got high anxiety as well. And that's something I really want to pick up here, because yes, you can do so much to your diet, but if you're in the chronic stress response, you're not going to see a lot of change. And I love the fact that Peter mentioned about inflammation, sugar and inflammation. But another story about sugar and stress, I've got a teacher who's under so much stress, he was about to get into a nervous breakdown. He had a lot of commitments, and he was found to be insulin resistant, but he was great. He was like, took that on board. He went very low carb, and he saw the direct impact of cutting out sugar on his stress response as well. He felt so much calmer. That means he could start actually managing the demands that he had. So it's so powerful, sugar, but also remember, stress can contribute to your sugar. And I'd love to mention another story, actually. It's a patient that I referred to Natalie West, the next speaker, and he is diabetic. He was brilliant. He went onto a keto diet, and I kept on going, okay, how come your sugars are still high? And he had the continuous glucose monitor on, and we couldn't figure out. Low carb, no grains. He was working on alcohol, and we can talk about that. But he was actually highly anxious, and he was highly stressed. And when he put the glucose monitor on, we actually looked at the report, and he was getting spikes when he was actually doing long fasts. And at that time, he was in high stress mode. So again, it's really important that you can be working on diet, but if you're not working on the stress response, you're not going to see results. And so then I referred him to Natalie, who worked on the mind, and it was really amazing to see that he was under a lot of pressure, and he didn't tell me, the alcohol he was drinking. And just 4 weeks with Natalie, he stopped drinking alcohol, his sugars have calmed down, but more importantly, he felt happier in himself, and that had a direct impact on his sugars. So mental health and the way you think, how you manage chronic disease has such an impact on your health. So this is all great reminders from today. Just one thing I'm going to add, it is really addictive. Sugar is really addictive. So when you're eating something, you go, why can't I stop? They created that bliss point. They wanted you to be addicted to it. So you can be feeling guilty, and you can, create all this self-talk, but sugar is addictive. It's 8 times more addictive than cocaine. And Peter's mentioned all of that already, but it's just a reminder that you have to create habits around you to reduce sugar, because it is addictive, and they put sugar in everything. I am going to mention alcohol, because when you're feeling stressed, and I see that a lot, it's easy to turn to alcohol, and that has another impact. Alcohol makes you anxious the next day. It affects your sleep. And so what I normally say is, when you're in the stress response, you actually want to go to the things that make you more stressed. So that's alcohol, sugar, caffeine, and you get caught up in the cycle. That means you're not sleeping well, that means you're tired, and that means you go back on that cycle of more caffeine, more sugar, and more alcohol. So we've got to go back to how you're feeling. What can you do to break that cycle? So what I'm going to mention today, as a functional GP, integrative GP, we do look at minerals, and that's something that a lot of doctors actually not trained in. So I had to do extra study to be trained in minerals. And the one mineral I'm going to mention today for you to take away is magnesium. So magnesium is needed for over 600 chemical reactions. Magnesium is easily lost in the body when you're stressed, and it makes you more prone to stress. So you're more likely to get caught up in that stress cycle. So magnesium is actually needed to help you with your cofactor for all your happy chemicals. It's needed to get insulin, sugar. It's needed by insulin to get sugar into your cells. Magnesium activates vitamin D. It activates a lot of your B vitamins. It's quite phenomenal how much we need magnesium. And guess what? Magnesium, you lose it when you're stressed. Sugar, caffeine, alcohol, all loses magnesium, and including grains. So I can actually see so many patients get caught up in that loss of magnesium. Sorry, I'll just get back. Loss of magnesium. And you're more susceptible to stress, which makes you lose more magnesium. And what I didn't mention, how important it is for sleep. I'm going to mention the types of magnesium, which are really important. So a lot of magnesium is available over the counter, but it's about the bioavailability. So the magnesium I normally recommend is glycinate and threonate. So threonate crosses the blood-brain barrier. Glycinate is well tolerated by the gut. So what you may find is when you buy over-the-counter magnesium, your gut hates it. It creates diarrhea. That means you can't get the doses that your body's looking for, and you give up. And it's easy to give up. So it's really important looking at the types of magnesium. The glycinate, the threonate, it's well tolerated and highly bioavailable. That means you can go higher in the doses. And I normally prescribe about 10 milligrams per kilo per day as your maintenance, and you can actually go up to 20 milligrams per kilo per day. And that is quite a good range. And what I'm noticing in my practice, you need much higher doses. And what does that actually translate to? All of a sudden people are, wow, I'm feeling calmer, I'm sleeping better, I'm getting a deeper sleep, I've got more energy. So this is one thing I always recommend to patients is magnesium. How we so easily lose it in today's world, and all the habits that we have make you lose magnesium. The last thing is nutrition. In this week, weekend's conference, you're so familiar with it. It's a good reminder where we go. So when we're stressed, a lot of patients carb crave, sugar crave. That's what our mind is sort of telling us what to do. But what we actually need is protein. And I had it was a great conversation I had with a patient. He said, Shami, that's so true. When I'm stressed, I want carbs. But what you've made me realize is, how do I fuel my body in terms of stress? So that's a little narrative that you can start asking yourself, what do I want to fuel my body with if I'm stressed? And what she realized was, wow, when I start fueling my body with protein, I feel better. I've got more energy. And remember, protein breaks down to amino acids, and amino acids are your building blocks for everything in your body. So all your happy chemicals, from serotonin to dopamine, all start from amino acids. Amino acids are needed for your gut health. Amino acids are needed for energy. So we forget protein when we're stressed, but it's the number one thing that you need to go to. And it's been really reinforced in this weekend's conference. So how do you fuel your body when you're stressed? And that's a great sentence to keep asking yourself, because it's so easy when you're stressed for emotions to take over and go, I need to feel great now. I'm going to get some sugar. I need to feel more energy now. I'm going to get some caffeine. And it's nice and this is great segue to what Natalie is going to talk about actually, is how your mind does affect your body and how we need to start living more consciously. So now my patients go, right, okay, I'm stressed. What do I need to do? Morning sun, decrease blue light, move more. During my lunch hour, I'm going to get as much sunlight, be out in nature. How do I fuel my body? I'm going to start the morning with a really good protein breakfast, and then the rest of the day just lines up beautifully. I add in some magnesium, and then what happens is you're having more energy, you've got clarity, you're able to cope with the demands of the day, and you go home and you've got this beautiful sleep hygiene just before bed. You've cut back on your blue light, you're sleeping easily, sleeping deeper, and the morning starts again better, more focus, and more energy. And this is what we really want to get into that cycle. But unfortunately, when you're stressed, it's so easy to go to the other side and you get caught up in the cycle. So today is just a great reminder that you can do it. You've got all the knowledge. It's about catching yourself in that moment going, what do I actually need now? And those were the 7 tips. So a few extras. So about the vagus nerve, it's just a great reminder. When you're in that stress response, it's sympathetic. It's, putting the gas pedal on. I just remind patients to put the brakes on as well. And there's so many activities that you can do, from singing, actually, funnily enough, yawning, sighing triggers the vagus nerve, even crying triggers the vagus nerve. Just trust your body knows what it needs. And then you can go off and do so many other activities. And I often say, have we forgotten to laugh as well as adults? Children laugh all the time. We need to laugh more. And then, of course, if you've got time to do yoga and all sorts of things. But remember, new experiences can regulate the nervous system, and simple things in nature. You don't have to go out and do a quick walk. You just sit in the sun and absorb nature. So when you're feeling so stressed, it's hard to know what's my next step. And these are the 7 key steps that are so quick and easy to do. Number 1, I always say breathe, get out in nature, sit in the sun, and really fuel your body with protein, and make sure you prioritize sleep. So what you can do, I don't know if you want to take your phones out, and then you can actually do a burnout quiz, and that's something you can do now or a bit later. And there's about 12 questions there, and it just highlights where you're at now. It's almost like a nice check-in. But as I said at the start, burnout is when you've gone from months and months of chronic stress and you're depleted, you're exhausted. But why wait for that to happen? Why can't we implement all these amazing tools of constant self-check-ins to actually not lead to burnout? Because when you do get to burnout, and I've got many patients who've gone to burnout, I have to tell them to stop, and I have to give them the permission to stop and take time out, and often sign them off for a couple of weeks because they've come to that point. And it's a difficult decision to make because you've got work commitments, you've got financial commitments. So why do we need to wait to get to that point? There's actually so much you can do, from regular self-check-ins and just keeping yourself in track. And this is actually a really nice lead to what Natalie's going to talk about living consciously. Awesome. Thank you.